Track 19.
So, I think we'd better start planning what we're going to do for our group project. Have you guys had any ideas?
I was thinking we should do something on extreme weather events, but I think Alex had some different ideas.
Yes, maybe we should look into more localised weather conditions and the effects on the immediate environment.
That's a good idea, Alex, but I don't think we'd be able to get much data on that, and we don't really have time to do our own research. What about doing something about the seasons?
I think the seasons might be a bit too wide-reaching, when we take into account the wind patterns and pressure systems.
Maybe you're right.
Well, how about Tom's idea of extreme weather conditions?
Yes, that sounds like a good idea. It's easy to break down into separate parts, and it certainly sounds more interesting.
I'd quite like to cover monsoons. I've been doing some reading on them and they're quite interesting.
Well, that sounds good. We should maybe take 2 areas each. That would make it easier for us to focus.
Well, we've got lots to choose from. We could do blizzards, heat waves, droughts, cyclones. There are loads. Why don't you do blizzards too, Tom?
I don't fancy doing them, but I wouldn't mind doing something on floods. They're linked to monsoons, I think, so it will be an easy transition. What do you fancy doing, Alex?
Well, I could always cover winds.
But that isn't really extreme enough.
I could do hurricanes. They're pretty exciting. How about doing cyclones, Emma?
I'd rather do heat waves and droughts, I think. I know a bit about them. I don't know anything about cyclones.
Cyclones are really interesting. I can cover them.
That sounds great. I was thinking about doing cyclones, but I'm happy for you to do them.
Track 20.
Right, shall we get started on some of the content?
Yes, we haven't got that much time. Does anyone know anything about their topics?
I know quite a lot about cyclones.
Do you?
Well, I studied them at high school. Cyclones usually start near the equator. They need quite warm water to form. Above the warm water, the vapour in the air forms clouds, and if there is low pressure, then these clouds will start to rotate.
Isn't it also the fact that the Earth rotates too, which makes the clouds spin more?
Yes, that too. Once they begin rotating, they can either lose momentum or keep gathering momentum until they hit land. These ones are called mature cyclones. Luckily, as soon as they hit land, they start to lose momentum and fade away, just because they don't have the warmth of the ocean underneath.
Well, that's a relief.
They can still be really destructive. They are like a big circle of wind. They blow strongly until the eye of the storm passes, the centre, where everything is really quiet, no wind or anything. But then the other side hits and the winds blow just as strongly, but in the other direction. It's just amazing. Yes, I would really like to cover that.
Well, it looks like we've got it all arranged then.
Track 21.
My family isn't very big. There's just my son and me. I'm a single parent. For the last 10 years, I've been concentrating on looking after my son James, who's now 14. But now I've met someone special, and we've just got engaged. My fiancé has 4 kids of his own, and we're going to get married in July. James is really excited about it. He's looking forward to having brothers and sisters in his new step-family. We live as one big extended family. There are 7 of us in our household. Besides my husband and me and our children, there's my aunt and 2 of my cousins. I stay at home and care for my mother because she's quite old and can't look after herself. Obviously, we suffer from a lack of space in the house, but we all get on well.
Track 22. 1.
Firstly, I am going to talk about the role of the parent. Secondly, I'll discuss the role of the child. And lastly, we'll look at the family unit as a whole.
2.
Parenting is a difficult job because no 2 children are ever the same.
3.
Families are important because they form the basis for socialization. Additionally, they educate and protect the next generation.
4.
The family structure has varied greatly over time. That is, different times have had different views of what a traditional family structure is.
5.
Many argue that less traditional structures are not as effective. However, there is little evidence to support this.
6.
Many people are having families later in life. Consequently, the rise in the number of single people may only be temporary.
7.
Families in other parts of the world differ from the Western norm. For instance, in some cultures, having multiple husbands or wives is the norm.
8.
Although there are many arguments for trying to keep the traditional family structure strong, I feel the key issue is the economic necessity of having a normal family structure.
Track 23.
As we have seen, changes in the structure of the family are constantly occurring, extended to nuclear, patrifocal to a more equal footing between the sexes, and dual parenting to single parenting. However, a recent phenomenon in the UK, which is changing the traditional family, is the increasing number of adults who continue to live with their parents until their 30s or sometimes even their 40s. The UK has traditionally been a society where offspring leave the family home in their late teens or early 20s to set up their own home and families. But in the last 25 years, this has decreased. Official statistics released by the Office of National Statistics show that today 10% of men in their early 30s still live with their parents. This compares with 5% of women in this age range. The reasons for this are complex and varied. It cannot be denied that some people are choosing to stay at home. Living with parents can be an easy option. Food is provided, heating and electricity are paid for, and rent, if any, is minimal. However, a third of those surveyed claimed they are living with their parents because it is too difficult to get on the property ladder. House prices in the last few decades have risen dramatically. Property is now 5 times the average annual salary, whereas it was only 3 times the average annual wage in the 1980s. This fact, coupled with high unemployment amongst young people, makes it virtually impossible for a single person to buy a home or even rent. The number of students going on to higher education has also been steadily increasing. Many of these students return home after finishing their studies as a result of the student debt they have accumulated. It can take many years to pay this off, and if the burden of rent or a mortgage is added to that, it can be just too much for a young adult's pocket. However, help is now at hand. The government is tackling some of the problems that cause people to remain with their parents with a new scheme, the Affordable Housing Scheme. This aims to help people part buy a house or flat by making housing more affordable for first-time buyers and possibly taking the strain away from elderly parents.
Track 24. The family is a topic which we will look at in great detail this term. For sociologists, the family is often seen as the beginning of socialization. Indeed, it is the seed of society itself. In recent decades, many old people have no longer been able to rely on their offspring for support, which was common 50 years ago. Many children are brought up by only one parent, something virtually unheard of before the 1960s. We can certainly say that during the last half-century, we have seen an enormous change in traditional family structures. The extended family lasted well into the early 1900s, and this kind of strong family unit was essential due to property ownership. Housing often was scarce, and it was necessary for people to live with parents and take over the property when their parents died. Of course, people still benefit from their family line. Still today, people generally inherit any money that their mother or father might have. In the UK, the last 50 years has also seen a decrease in the number of offspring parents have, whereas in the 1950s, only 10% of offspring were only children. This number has risen. Nowadays, this is the case for just over a third of children. Track 25. In Victorian times, the upper classes made up less than 3% of the entire population of Britain, yet this class held more than 90% of the country's wealth. This shows the massive gap there was between rich and poor, a gap which has shrunk considerably in the last century. Today, we're going to look at the wide differences in family life between rich and poor in Victorian times. Let's begin with the upper classes. The upper classes of the Victorian period were generally the nobility or the clergy. Most of their servants were very poorly paid, but were always accommodated within the homes of upper-class Victorian families, so they didn't have to pay for accommodation, food, and often clothing. The money which they did earn, they normally sent home to their families. Many Victorian servants came from the countryside, where the effects of the Industrial Revolution had resulted in job losses. Amongst these servants were cooks, housemaids, stable hands and butlers. The family would also employ a nanny, who, although employed by the family, was not traditionally seen as a servant. A nanny's primary role was to care for the children. She was responsible for teaching the children how to behave, looking after them when they were ill, and instilling discipline into them. Nannies did not, however, educate the children. Generally, children from wealthy families did not attend school outside the family home. Tutors would come to the house to do this, and although on occasion mothers taught their children to read and fathers gave their children some instruction in Latin, this was not a common occurrence. Now, the Victorian upper classes had the reputation of being quite cruel, but this wasn't always the case. They were also quite charitable. Ragged schools were set up with funding from the upper classes so that poor children could have some form of education. Additionally, most Victorian parents were very proud of their children, who were often seen as prized possessions. This goes against the common idea that parents were very hard on their children. In fact, the opposite was generally the rule. However, the situation for lower-class families was very different. In the lower classes, child labour was rife. Children, as young as 8, earned a living as chimney sweeps for wealthy houses. Now, let's move on to looking at the lower-class families in more detail. You'll find that very often